Yeah, then about the practice gear. So now, of course, today we have a possibility to wear some protective gear or not. It depends on your preferences and what kind of weapons are you using. So we have possibilities to use soft weapons, sticks, and then steel. But with the other dimension, let's say, is the training method. So are you doing full contact? If you are, obviously, if you're using soft weapons compared to steel, you will be needing different kind of protective gear. But that's mostly like related to sparring. See, because historically, yeah, there was some protective gear available, of course, especially in the later periods. But as far as I found out, like how the practice was really done, there are bits and pieces in fighting books and some old documents and things like that. The main problem there is always that if you have to train an army, how do you train your army so that not everybody gets injured, because then you don't have any army anymore. That's the problem. And same story if you are a fencing master and you are teaching students. Obviously you don't want your students to be injured, because they will go away and they're not going to pay you. So you will be out of job. So I think it comes down to, do you want to simulate the medieval training practices or not? Using protective gear is it's not uncommon in the Middle Ages. Of course, people did have helmets eventually, and some padded jackets or gambesons, and later on some armor. And maybe the older armor was recycled for training purposes, and then you could have these wooden sticks or clubs for practicing, and that's one way to go. But then if you are practicing for civilian or this kind of poor level people who still wanted to use the weapons, and they were sometimes employed in the armies as well, you would have had to use different kind of practice methods in order not to get injured seriously. So how it's done then is that you might even have only sharp weapons. So obviously you would maybe start with sticks, light sticks, to learn the motor movements. Although from this we don't have too much evidence, like actual evidence over there. But we know that clubs were used, so you can start practicing with those. But even a hit from a club to your fingers, you can end up with broken fingers, so they were a little bit dangerous. But one thing I have found is that if you would be practicing with a sword, let's say you only have a sharp sword, you would be practicing like this. So you would have thumb here, and then you would hit with the flat of the sword instead of the edge. And there are like two reasons. Obviously you don't want to injure your opponent or training partner, but you also don't want to injure or break the edge, because swords were super expensive. Not everybody had these. And if you are would be having an axe, you could flip it. So if this is the cutting edge, you could flip it so this is the back edge, and use that instead. So even if you hit something, it's not going to be fatal immediately. But with swords, the flat. And if somebody would be having a shield or something else, you could hit the shield with the flat as well. And one benefit is that you wouldn't be destroying the shield, because shields were also quite expensive. Maybe even as expensive as the swords. A specialist was needed to make the shield. You could make your own, but it wouldn't be as good. So that's about using the weapon. So now when you see people practicing, they are using the edge, but that's fine if you have a blunt sword. Maybe the rich people had things like that, but not the poor. Or if this was your only weapon and you wanted to practice with your friend, it would be something like this. Then of course the second problem is the distance. So if you are close enough, even if you are hitting with the flat, if you want to practice thrusting, this is not gonna help. So the practice was started from longer distance. At least this is from old Sicilian traditions, that longer distance there is no protective gear, but even if you make a full thrust, it wouldn't reach your opponent or training partner. And the distance was quite long because you were just learning the movements. So you were not actually trying to hit your opponent. And then slowly, when you get better and better, you would then have people coming closer and closer until they were actually in the fighting distance. At that point, you were basically proficient, so if somebody was going to thrust at you, you already could parry it safely, at least with very minimal risk. So then the practice was more like that. Obviously, of course, I don't think anybody would have, like on purpose, if somebody makes a mistake, they wouldn't kill the training partner, but it was like the real distance then. So this is something we can apply with friends when we are practicing with swords. Starting from longer distance, so there is no protective gear needed really, not even gloves, because take it easy, and of course go slow first. We all know that. And it's a tricky thing that if you don't have a teacher or fencing master, that when to move closer, when to go faster, and even just trying to keep the pace constant. It's quite easy to start slow and then somebody gets excited and goes faster, and then things start happening. Maybe some injuries will come, so you have to be careful, even with blunts, even with striking with flats. You have to be really careful. So it's more like take some choreography, some prearranged movements. I will do this cut and you will do this parry and counter attack, or I will thrust and then you will push it down and counter thrust, after which I will do the same. Because mistakes happen, you can easily misstep somewhere and fall down and trip over. And if you're using sharps, it can be really nasty. I wouldn't recommend that. Actually, historical records say, at least in the British, that please do not practice with sharp swords. So they were using blunts, but this is like in the, I think, 16th century already. With sticks, it's a little bit safer. So if you want to go fast, you can take if you can cut some fresh sticks, they will be really bendy. Then you can go like really fast and you will get some welts, but no broken bones or anything. It will still hurt. That's one thing that was utilized. But it will be difficult to execute some of the movements really well because the sticks are so bendy. They're like whips more than sticks. But one thing I found out, that if there is no protective gear, of course the eyes are in a big danger always with these. If you hit the eye, it's gone, most likely. It can't be fixed. So the attitude must be sharp, serious. I don't mean like you can still laugh, it's allowed, but you have to be serious, like you have to understand what you're trying to do. You have to have control of your weapon, and you have to monitor what your opponent is doing, because sometimes they do something which was not agreed, and you will have to be able to react to in that situation, for example by stepping away, or so that you won't get hurt. Sometimes they miscalculate the distance, sometimes they trip and rush at you by accident. So that's kind of interesting in that without protective gear your practice becomes more dangerous and you have to become more alert. You just can't rush in, really, and that's how a real fight would go as well. You just cannot rush in without understanding what you are doing, otherwise you might get hurt. With armor or protective gear, you already know that, I'm not probably gonna be injured, at least not badly, so I can do whatever I want. I can, jump in and attack and try some crazy stuff, but is that really what you want to be practicing? If it is, okay, please go ahead, but for me, maybe not a good idea. So pick and choose what you want to do, but definitely I recommend. I got this one comment from one Buhurt guy. So this is the group who is practicing with full metal armor and heavy swords, and they are hitting quite hard, but it's still quite safe because the armor is so good. So we were practicing with single swords, no protective gear, and he said it feels more dangerous. And he was right, it is more dangerous, because if I hit him somewhere, it's gonna hurt. So he told me that it's different kind of training experience, so you have to be really careful what you do. So how you practice will affect what you learn, so keep that in mind. Are you practicing something that you can apply in a real situation? These days, well, nobody possibly has to use a sword anymore, at least in here. But if you are practicing just for the rule set your group is using, then maybe using protective gear and optimizing the techniques for that would be the best. I have these little guys flying over here. Go ahead. I don't know what they find in my fingers. Right, so those were my thoughts about that for today.